Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Friday Chats with Leaders. I'm Leon Pert and I'll be your host today. And with me, I've got John Muir. Our topic for today is to talk about the brains you're probably wasting. You've all been in meeting rooms or sat in office spaces where you've realized that potentially the systems and practices you've put in place aren't best helping the people around you. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about what it might take to tweak and adjust that so that you can optimize the outcomes for you, the people inside of your team, and extract the goodness from the neurodiversity that exists in all of the people around us. I'm joined today by John Muir. John's an engineer, project manager, and a people leader with more than 15 years experience delivering complex systems in demanding safety critical environments. I've been around John for several years now, and I've seen his abilities firsthand. He's a deeply human-centered leader, focuses on trying to extract the best from the people around him, and brings a level of insight and awareness you don't normally see from those with deep engineering backgrounds. He and I have shared the skill of looking into the abilities of people and recognizing strengths and the challenges and opportunities that exist in finding the brilliance that exists inside of all people. John's been recently shaped through his interactions on neurodiversity and recent experiences at both home and work. And it's a combination of personal insight and lived experience through professional observations gives him a unique lens on leadership frameworks. John, you didn't come through this topic through deep research on Wikipedia or a textbook. You tell me how you actually arrived here. What's that look like for you?
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Thanks for the very kind intro as well. But yeah, as you alluded to, it was really two strong coinciding threads that came together at very similar times. It led to a pretty big aha moment. Really alluded to something that seemed right in front of me the whole time, but wasn't obvious until recently. And as you said, one was on the home front, and then a parallel thread in the workplace. If I kick off with a brief overview of the home front. For the most part, we've been really blessed to have kids that just have this really strong innate love of learning and just a natural curiosity. And that was all reflected back to us from multiple educators and various environments, etc. And we kind of hit a point in time reasonably recently where we just hit this really abrupt bump in the road, where some of that love of learning and curiosity just seem to drop quite rapidly with one of our kiddos in particular. And since then I've learned a lot of parents have kind of experienced similar threads, and the environment's very quick to apply what they know well, which is quite a heavy deficiency lens focused on the individual, like what's going on with this individual that's led to this outcome. Rather than looking at what's the root cause that's triggered this sudden change. So, the research up till this point, I should probably say before I dig too much deeper, that pretty much led us into diving down a big rabbit warren of educating myself on what are the various factors at play here, and all pointers are actually more towards environment as opposed to individual, at least in our case. And we got to a point there where we decided that really the strongest lever we had was to make a pretty significant change to the environment, specifically in this case, the school environment. And I have to say, Leon, like I was fairly skeptical going in. As my first lap around the buoy as such in terms of this territory. And although many professionals said, yep, change the environment, it's going to fix a whole heap of stuff, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm still bracing for a bumpy road. But I have to say I was frankly really shocked to find that change environment did actually make a substantial, very short turnaround improvement. That was almost kind of unbelievable in many ways. So that's really, I suppose, when I look back and reflect, it's really underscored that value of an impact of environment on particular individuals, and particularly when we're overlaying neurodiversity considerations. And I suppose before I stop the big monologue, in parallel, I was kind of seeing similar patterns pop up in the workplace at about the same time, seeing some really extremely intelligent people who were just starting to disengage and And I suppose my curiosity started to peak around, is it the individual, is something going on with them, or, what's going on in the environment that's kind of led to this behavior? That's really what's triggered this really, I suppose, fairly recent strong focus on environments, particularly as they relate to neurodiverse or mixed neurodiverse individuals and teams.
I've certainly experienced, you don't do 20 years in technical workforces without becoming more aware of neurodiversity. As the literature has increased, the conversations have matured, you certainly start to see neurodiverse tendencies emerging in the people around you that you perhaps weren't aware of prior. Now, not dissimilar to you, John, my children much older than yours, but similarly struggled academically at school, and we couldn't quite work out why, coming at it from very different perspectives for each of them. But with some additional research, it was identified that both of them had neurodiverse tendencies as well and could benefit from some adjustments to the way they learnt at school, as well as the opportunity for us to think about medication pathways and stuff like that. Now, that for me was a few years ago now, but it did also similarly reveal to me that there were a couple of people inside of the organizations that I led that perhaps weren't being best benefited by the environment by which we were creating, which, you try and foster these real, for me anyway, I try the open and honest collaborative environments where there's some big ideation and brainstorming activities, where you get everybody involved and recruit all of the brain power you can into generating the best ideas. And what I found was that going through that process actually alienated some people in the team, because it was suboptimal for them in the way that they were approaching learning and bringing their best selves to work as well. So I'm interested in your reflection on that, John, what you're seeing professionally, and some of the perhaps ways that we can go around best identifying those types of untapped potential. And I know that you share some useful analogies that might help bring that home.
Yeah, no worries. I'll pick up your thread there rather on analogies, and we can kind of pivot from there. But I was fortunate enough to have a psychologist brief on a very similar adjacent topic, and she used the analogy of sports cars and racetracks to describe neurodiverse individuals specifically, and I found it's really resonated with me, and it's helped me just frame different contexts on this topic. But essentially the bottom line up front there was, the right environment, if you've got a really well groomed racetrack, a race car performs tremendously well and would far outperform your everyday commuter by a long shot. But you start introducing some bumpy terrain, things like that, and that high performance vehicle starts to really disproportionately struggle in comparison with your everyday commuters. So it's one of those cases where it's the exact same car, but different racetrack, and then you've got this extremely different outcome. And I think the kind of extent of how different that outcome can be is fairly relative to the, I suppose, extent of neurodiversity of a given individual or team. And yeah, obviously, the greater that gap, the greater the friction as such. So I think that framing has really, as a leader, helped me start to develop a new appreciation, or a greater appreciation of the importance of environmental design as it relates to how much friction is that environment creating for the people playing in that environment, or engaging with that environment. How much energy we're burning unnecessarily, how much is the team having to mask or compensate or translate just to fit in to an environment that might be suboptimal for that particular team or individual. So I think too, one other theme there, Leon, before I put the mic down, was it was a really strong framing of stepping away from the accommodation lens and much more towards an environmental architecture lens of how do we actually make neurodiverse teams part of our core value proposition, rather than how do we introduce crutches for these individuals that seem to be struggling in this environment. So I think that paradigm shift has been really powerful.
Yeah, there's many threads to pull on there. I think the one that I'll ask you to talk more about, John, is that how do we, I don't know the best way to extend the metaphor, but how do we groom the racetrack, or how do we create better vehicles that are better at compensating when the racetrack isn't smooth, whichever way the analogy needs to go, such that all cars can benefit from the track rather than just highly specialized ones, or ones that are geared or predispositioned in certain ways?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question. There's a couple of ways we could step into it, and one of those, Leon's perhaps like exploring an example or two of times where I felt
Sure.
like I might have got it wrong, and what might I have done. I suppose not to sidestep your question entirely, but that is, one of the key focuses. We haven't alluded to it yet, but I am intending to do or write a long form article on this exact topic, based off research in the market, going out, speaking with other leaders like yourself to learn what's worked and what hasn't, to essentially compile a experience based answer to your question there. But yeah, I'll take your guide there. I could step into an example, or if you wanted me to answer the question.
No, let's use an example and then tease it out if we need to, John. So
Yep.
tell me about a time that you got it wrong then. Like, it's that's often where the best learning comes from, John. Talk me through that. What did it teach you?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, this one's a workplace related one. Obviously, I'll keep it fairly general, not to incriminate. But this one in particular relates to a like high justice drive theme. It's something I've noticed both at home and work, actually, that particular, especially neurodiverse individuals have this really strong sense of justice, and something that actually came up in our mutual friend Julia's research as well. Certainly not a global thing, but it comes up enough that I've become aware of it as such. But in this particular example, it manifested in this really strong conviction to surface and communicate risk, project-related risk. And in this particular case, I've got a couple that have shared this similar theme. The environment and leadership were reading that strong conviction as exaggeration or inflating reality, and it led to something of a boy who cried wolf style dynamic. And it didn't really matter how the individual, what mechanism the individual used to communicate, whether it's in writing, verbal, diagrams, or what have you. It was kind of just receiving that same fairly blocked response from leadership, if that makes sense. So yeah, in this case, that in that particular example, it led to quite a lot of frustration in the individual itself, and even the discussions around that topic were more focused on the particular interpersonal friction as opposed to the topic that was being discussed, itself. Like the risk itself, which was obviously fairly unproductive. So I suppose, on reflection, hindsight, what did I do wrong, or what I perceive I did wrong in that particular instance was, the role I showed up as was somewhat of an intermediary. It's like, well, I could see, leadership's kind of feeling that this particular message or signal is not valid for whatever reason. I'm going to spend time with the individual trying to translate and then message up this particular message, which I think in some ways there's benefit to that. Like, I think my heart was in the right place if I was giving myself a pat on the back. But what I think it did, on the flip side, was almost expand that distance between the individual and the audience he was really convicted on reaching, if that makes sense. So and I think over time, that distance is what eventually led to disengagement and eventually departure from that workplace, which is obviously quite quite obviously a loss and a waste, but both in terms of individual frustration and psychosocial health, but losing that really valuable or extremely valuable specialist knowledge and experience.
So talk to me about how you might do better, I guess. What's the way, how do you better shape if you talk about shaping the environment, if you use the racetrack analogy, talk about trying to remodel or reshape things such that the better outcomes are achieved from all of the multiple inputs we have available to us. What, with the power of hindsight, what adaptations or changes do you think would have been warranted, or what have you introduced into the teams that you manage now going forward?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. And what jumped out to me, once again, I come across this via mutual friend Julia. There's a term that I didn't have the language for at the time called double empathy, or the double empathy problem, and it's essentially, without making a huge theory discussion, it's just framing the fact that when there's communication between a neurodiverse and a neurotypical individual or individuals, that there's an onus on both sides of that equation to flex and accommodate to transmitting and receiving those messages. And I think in this case, the individual that's trying to get that message out was trying a whole heap of things, like I'll just put it in writing, or I'll say it verbally, I'll draw a great diagram that's trying to communicate this message. Whereas I think what I was seeing, even me personally, but as well as leadership, were not necessarily putting that empathetic lens on as such, as to what is it that's going on here, what's the message we're not hearing, what's been said that we're not hearing. So I think, to answer your question more specifically, I invested a lot of time, I suppose, with the individual, trying to understand their message, but in the same breath, I spent very little time with leadership going, well, hey, how could we collectively do a better job of hearing this message, helping this individual feel heard and appreciated? Which, that's the piece, that's the thread I'd double down on, when I encounter a situation like that in the future.
How do we build that empathetic community, John, in the workplace nowadays? It feels like there's more and more online meetings, there's more and more chat messaging, there's less human to human interaction than it perhaps has been historically in the workplace. How do we build communities that are a little bit more empathetic in both directions, as you mentioned, not just one person trying to reassess or reframe so that they can reach somebody else in communication, but both people making that effort? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's good. And if I had to pick up my phone and speed dial a phone a friend, I'd have to say it'd be you in this case, Leon, in terms of some of the forums you've run. I was going to unpack a little bit later in terms of just individual team dynamics. If you're starting bottom up, I think exercises like team working agreements are extremely valuable. Like, every time I've run it, I've been pleasantly surprised at how much value I got out of, say, a 2-hour session, with a bit of prep work. So I think, communicating and then providing a platform for individuals in a team to openly share, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, just being open and honest around what their working preferences are, how they like to receive feedback, and then documenting that and having members agree, to abide by that agreement is a strong tactical bottom-up one. But I know, yourself specifically, you've run some really good organization-wide almost activities to ultimately get to know the person behind the professional, as you put it. And I think there's a lot of, you can get a lot of mileage out of that, and I certainly have personally. So perhaps it's maybe an opportunity for you to share some of your experience with a couple of those workshops.
One of the things I try and encourage people to do is that, I mean, you buy anything nowadays, you go down to the shop and buy a new lamp, or I recently bought a new pair of wireless earbuds, and everybody pretty much intrinsically knows what to do with them. Like, they're not complicated things. It's a lamp, right? You plug it into the wall, put a globe in it, and flick the switch. But all of those things will come with a user manual. There'll be a document that comes with it describing how to set it up and how to use it and what it's for and what you shouldn't do with it if you don't want it to fail early or not get the best out of it. And what I found is that the most complicated piece of equipment that anybody will ever deal with in any of the workplaces is the other humans that are in the workplace with them. But we've taken very little time working out each other's user manuals. How do we get the best out of them? How do we set them up for success? What things might erode their ability to be effective? and we should document it. And there's numerous frameworks for us to go through and try and identify that for each individual. It also takes a level of self-awareness for some people. Some people aren't yet mature enough in their own self-awareness to be really clear in articulating what that means to them. But there are certain ways you can go about addressing that. I'm a huge proponent of Leonism that you'll hear time and time again is you work with the person, not the professional. So get to know the person behind the professional. And people hear that over and over again. I think it's vitally important that you spend some time getting to know the people that you work with, not just the signature block or email address or job title that they have for where they work. It's interesting, John. I've seen it work well. I've seen it done poorly and not work well. But I myself have had my own realizations. I've come to the realization that not everybody loves to stand around a whiteboard and ideate, even though I do. Some people would prefer to have a whole heap of information emailed to them, some days to digest it, and then an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation about it. That's their preferential. If it was written in their user manual, that's how they prefer to receive information and have conversations about things. And that nuanced approach to individuality is the way that leaders start to unlock brilliance. And it doesn't matter, people are neurotypical and neurodivergent, the same principles apply. Get to know who they are, how they think, how you get the best out of them, how you best prepare information for them, how they best work with others. All those things are useful points of information that feed into a greater whole for the leaders to start to unlock their potential.
Yeah,
Any
absolutely.
applications on that, John?
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, the only other thing that come to mind as you were talking, and it's almost a bit of a throwaway consideration, but I think education goes a fair way. And I think back to Ray's that I've picked up that race track analogy from presentation I saw. It was only 20 minutes. I mean, it was just a specialist getting up, giving a pretty light overview of neurodiversity in the workplace, and it's stuck with me. And I think a lot of people in the workplace aren't intentionally going out of their way to do the wrong thing. They're not going out intending to be ignorant and insensitive to individuals' needs. So I think there is a large education piece there, but I'm hesitant to say the solutions put everyone on a webinar for 60 minutes and suddenly it's all solved. I think that multi-pronged approach, including some of the things you and I've unpacked in the last 5 minutes or so, it goes a long way.
Yeah, so often it just comes down to unresolved friction points or unrecognized friction points. Now, it's not to say that friction is bad. Some friction is warranted or needed or necessary in certain environments, but what are some of the ways that we can go around reducing friction for those with neurodiverse aspects, or even to extract greatness that exists in all of the workforce? What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, I'll go with something particularly tactical, and we can explore a couple of different ones. But I think one big one that comes up a lot is time to process, and there's also a predictability element to this as well. But a lot of neurodiverse individuals do place a lot of stock in the ability to come up with a well thought out, well considered response to an ask. And I find us neurotypical folk might prefer have some lead time, but if we were put on the spot, yes, it might frustrate us, but it may not have, and probably doesn't have, the same level of physiological stress that that a neurodiverse individual might experience. So just basic things I've implemented as just one easy example is committing to putting detailed agendas out the day before particularly important meeting or important decisions need to be made, and not just the one line this is the work group title. It's no, these are the exact decisions that I'm seeking to get out of this time together, and this is the input I'm requesting of the audience. And I think just those basics of doing the preparation such that your team can contribute to their best potential and minimize, as you said, minimize that friction of being put on the spot is one really easy, accessible example.
We mentioned team working agreements before, but it's often a thing that comes up in team working agreements that there'll be no meetings without an agenda. It's a regular thing that comes up that people, almost every team that I've ever been involved in have acknowledged as a really valuable thing to commit to. And we tried to normalize the 5 Ps of meetings as the structure for putting agendas together. There's many different ways of doing it, but we've certainly tried to make sure that everyone has a very clear purpose or product if it's being produced, the process you're going to go through, the people who are involved in it, and the place that you're meeting is just a good way of providing real clarity to people. It's a real tactical tool. What are some of the other things that we sort of miss in perhaps leading neurodiverse people, John, that you've seen in your research and in your own lived experience?
Yeah, I think the other big one that pops up a lot is adjacent, but it's the consideration of predictability in environments. This one came in my own reading. I know Julie has uncovered a fair bit here as well. And I think it's something that largely you and I almost got for free when we were working together in the Scaled Agile framework, because the way that the framework is structured is very predictable. You go through one daily stand-up and you know what a daily stand-up's about. You go through one sprint, you know what a sprint's about. And then similarly with a program increment, and it is an extremely predictable structure. And I think at the time I took for granted just how powerful that is for mixed neurotype teams. And when I'm no longer in that environment, I found myself reintroducing aspects of it, if not by the textbook Scaled Agile. There are parts of that predictable planning cadence that I have rolled out, and it's something. I know it's a higher drag than getting agendas out the day before. Not everyone's got the flexibility to restructure the way their teams and organizations run, but I think there's some good lessons and philosophies in frameworks, including Scaled Agile. Not to say that's the only one, but the extent to which we can make our working environments and cadences more predictable does tend to have a disproportionately positive effect on mixed neurotype teams.
I often talk that, so I think predictability is one aspect that's opened up through systemized ways of work, like Scaled Agile, many others that have different types of planning and review cycles and different things like that. There's not saying that one's better than the other, but one of the things that systemizing your body of work does allow for predictability. The other thing it also does is, in my opinion, it opens up creativity. I'm a big believer that constraints are a mechanism of unlocking creativity. And I often use the analogy, I've got a piece of art, it's a photo behind my head here, but you can imagine, John, if I asked everybody in the workplace to design a piece of art for my lounge room, most people would panic. They're like, I don't know you, Leon. I don't know what your lounge room looks like. I've got no idea what to do. I'm not very good at art, or whatever it might be. All these things go through their head. But if I say to them, I want you to design a piece of artwork for my lounge room, I like bright blues and oranges and circular patterns. Everybody gets a visual picture in their own brain of what that might look like. And it could be very different for each person. The way that they'd implement it will be different. But just by offering up those constraints, it's unlatched the self-doubt or self-limitations that were impinging on their ability to be creative. I found the same thing happens with that plan and execute and then review style of work. Is, hey, here's the general outcomes we're trying to achieve. Here's the time you've got to achieve it. Here's what we think a good outcome looks like. And then over to you to work out how to get there is a really fulfilling way of working, because it taps into that inner creativity. And it doesn't matter. It's neurodiverse, neurotypical. It really doesn't matter. It's an opportunity to unlock that going forward.
Really good.
One of the things that comes up with leading neurodiverse people is differences in body language. John, have you got perspectives that might help our listeners about what that means and how so much of human communication is on interpretation of body language? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm certainly far from a specialist in the area, but yeah, I think for the most part, and kind of does relate a little to the double empathy problem, that we are, say we broadly are wired to kind of look at someone's physiology and go, well, if I was wearing that facial expression, I'd be, you know, I'd be pretty angry inside or frustrated inside, or, you know, is what I'm saying just not connecting? And I suppose the first thing that come to mind when you ask that question, Leon, is that double empathy framing of, hold on a minute, like, you know, am I reaching to a conclusion here that's not founded? Because, to your point, particularly neurodiverse individuals may just have different wiring, and due to that wiring, hold different body language when they're you know, feeling different emotions. So I think, you know, to make it a little bit more practical and tactical, one thing I've often done in those cases where there has been doubt, let's say it was a group meeting and I've observed, you know, someone's physiology just didn't look what I would have thought as, you know, healthy and engaged. I'll loop back afterwards and provide that one-on-one opportunity just to explore what's going on. And yeah, most times, to your, you know, partly to your point there, it was actually, you know, nothing negative boiling in the inside. It was just a fairly neutral expression, and, you know, internally there was a lot of engagement. And yeah, I might pause there if anything bubbled up, or you want to pivot me left or right.
I mean, there's two things that come to mind. One I'll share is that I often find it's useful to reframe and validate. And it's a really difficult thing to do in the moment. So if somebody comes across as that seemed a bit more severe a response than I was expecting, or their body language seemed off, or whatever it might be, it's sometimes useful to use some language I picked up from Brene Brown, which she calls rumble words, which allows you to enter into a bit of uncertainty. And the one that I use the most is, when this happened, the story that went through my head was. And it's just an opportunity to engage in a conversation about this third thing, which is your idea of what happened. So it's not criticize of the behavior or the person you're involved in. It's not criticize of yourself. It's this third thing, which is the idea that you put out between the two of you. So as an example, when John, in that meeting, Dave brought up this idea and you seemed to act really severely to it. And the story that went through my head was that you were really against that idea, but you didn't say anything. I wondered if you could help me understand what happened there. And it just puts this story out here as this third thing that you can talk about. It really creates an opportunity for it. And the same thing, it's a term I use regularly and frequently, and I encourage other people to invest in their own rumble language to enter into those types of conversations. Can help you quickly get to the bottom of whether something is a problem or not.
Yeah, I like a really good example as well. And I liked your deliberate focus on the phrasing there, because you're right, it could very easily, you know, blow up and have the unintended consequence of that individual feeling like they're being targeted.
Being targeted. That's why it's very important to introduce a third thing into that conversation. And the one I often use is the idea in my head is the third thing. Fantastic, John. So I guess if there's leaders that listen into this conversation, or we're talking to leaders ourselves in the future, what's something simple that all people in positions of leadership, whether they be positional authority or social leadership and influence, or just within the workplace, so what's some specific activity they might be able to introduce Monday morning when they rock into work next week that might help them better engage with the people around them and unlock the potential that exists within those people?
Yeah, look, I think that's a good one. I'm definitely going to rinse off something we covered in a bit of depth earlier, and I thought about this, you know, before we joined the conversation. And if I had to think of the one thing I've done a number of times that's had, you know, disproportionately great returns, it is the team working agreement. And you, I think, sounds like you had another cousin spin-off, which was the user manual, which I've not done personally. I think something like that. We've covered the obvious reasons. Like, I think creating that Venn diagram of how your team works and where those sweet spots are is really important. But I got this one from you in terms of, I think you used the phrase like words mean something, or something towards along those lines. But I think it signals that you're someone that's open to having these discussions and exploring this terrain. And I can definitely cite at least one really strong example where after a team working agreement, a team member reached out to me and said, well, like, I'm just really glad to see that we can have this kind of discussions and we can actually lead teams this way in this environment. All of my experience to date has been very command and control, and not much stock has been put in what is the team's preference. Like that just didn't to them feel like something that was able to be or welcome to be discussed. So I think it's important to introduce that, benefit as well.
Let's get a little bit tactical then. If it is a Monday morning thing, if someone's listening to this and they want to do something different on Monday morning, I'll use a number 3. What's the most important 3 steps in bringing people together and developing a team working agreement?
Yeah, well, we covered the first one earlier around giving people a bit of a heads up. I think that's always good. I've always, and this is just the way that we've done it previously, but there are plenty of great resources online. I know we've used the Mural templates for team working agreements. I think it's good to have a visual canvas that if you're not co-located, if you're co-located, it's probably a whole lot easier. But if you're working geographically dispersed, having a tool like Mural or similar is a good start. Somewhere where people can physically engage with this canvas is good. So I think in terms of setting it up for success, it's around just really describing, giving people a heads up, describing what's going to happen, why are we doing this crazy thing? No one's talked about working agreements before. Sharing that, the intent of this is such that we arrive at a team environment that is just, more conducive of getting the best out of, everyone on the team. They're the first thoughts that come to mind, but happy for you to pivot me.
Well, what are there's the part that I'd like to extract from you, I think, John, is a couple of specific details of things. I know you mentioned a template, but what is a couple of elements that absolutely need to be addressed for us to create an effective team working agreement?
Yeah, no, that's good. I'll rattle off a bit of a list and then we can together, put it together. Sure. But I think the ones that have always I always get most feedback about are actually the ones that are kind of more of a warm-up activity that we typically have done at the start, which is, am I a morning person or an evening person? Do I need time to process, or no, I'm actually pretty quick on my feet. I'm quick processing power. I'm happy for you to catch me out with a question. There's ones around, when people like to do their best creative work. Questions around like meeting times, desirable meeting times. Do we want to do stand-ups in the morning? Do you want to meet in the afternoon? Do you receive energy from, are you an extrovert? Do you get energy from being around people, engaging with people, or you're more introverted? So those individual characteristic style questions I always find generate some great discussion. Like people are often like, wow, I didn't know that about so-and-so, or that's opened their eyes. So that's one. And I think that's a good one to start on, because it does tend to be a bit fun. People get a bit of a kick out of it. The other one that I like, and I introduced more recently, is around feedback. That wasn't one, that wasn't a variable that we had initially when you and I were together, but I've added one around, how do people like to receive feedback? When do they like to receive it? Is it straight after an incident, or do they want invite in their calendar? So when we do one-on-ones, I kind of bank up the feedback over the week and run through it. I think that was really a really powerful addition.
Right.
And before I stop the monologue and let you jump in for a bit, I think the other one that generates a lot of great discussion is, as a team, like, what does a really great outcome look like for us in 12 months or insert X time period? I find that a lot of people, it gets a lot of diverse thought. You see things go onto that board that are really diverse in thought. Some of it's around team cohesion and how they're growing, as relationship wise as a team, and others will be really public, award-winning achievements. And I find that's a really rich discussion, but I'll pause there for a bit.
No, I think you covered a couple of hot points that I would have focused on and prioritized as well, John. I ran a series of meetings for each vertical segment of the teams that I lead recently, and the first activity we did was do a sort of left to right dot line of early versus late. Prefer to talk through problems than or read problems. These same sort of little, put yourself on the chart. Where do you fit on there? And have a conversation about what stands out to you inside of that, introverts versus extroverts, etc. And again, it stimulates a lot of really positive conversation and starts to dig into that narrative we talked about earlier on the meeting about learning a bit more about the person behind the professional, which is really, really important.
No, absolutely.
So, John, I wanted to dive into what you're going to do next. Like, we started this conversation about leading neurodiverse teams as a identifier in the fact that there's probably some brain power and workforces around you that you're underutilizing. I know you've got big aspirations for this as a bit of a field of research or a focus area for you. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the future looks like for you in this area, and whether or not anyone in our audience can get involved in that?
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite there, Leon. And yeah, you're right. I think from what I've found to date, and certainly welcome people to send me material through I might have missed, but I haven't found like a singular example of this is what great looks like. Like, hey, everybody, go check out, what these guys are doing over here. That's gold class, workplace environment design for mixed neurotype teams. What I suspect is the case is there's a sprinkling of really great practices across the environments that we work in. And to your question of what's next for me, at least phase one is going to be some good just one-on-one interview Q&A style engagements with leaders in particularly technically rich, technically complex environments, not exclusively defense, but initially I'll bound it to technically complex environments that I'm most accustomed to working in. And the key goal there is to get some real world feedback on what leaders have found is actually working, what's going really well, what's not going so well, what lessons have they learned, has anything kind of really jumped out and surprised them, have they had some aha moments and learnings, and then with all that information to synthesize all of that input into at least my vision at this stage is a long form article that's exactly the playbook as such as it is developed from all of that research. So if people are interested, to your question there, how do people be a part of it? At this point, LinkedIn's probably the best way. If this struck a chord and people are absolutely keen, whether it's keen to consume the output, John, let me know when it's done, or actually I'd love to be part of that conversation, or I might know people who may love to be part of that conversation. I certainly invite people just to ping me on LinkedIn, and that'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, I can't help but think that there's not a cavalcade of leaders around the globe all trying to work out how to solve this particular problem, and they're coming up with little things and trying them out, and some of them are working and some of them aren't. I'd love for us all to be able to collectively benefit from that body of work. If you're somebody who's thought about this, tried some different things, and realized that there is some value to them, please reach out to John. If you're a neurodiverse person in the workplace and you've had leaders that have done certain things that have helped you, please, again, reach out to John. Let's try and collate this information together, put together in such a way that it's easily digestible so that we can better harness the great contributions of everybody in the workplace and get more race cars on racetracks, right? Instead of trying to have a race car plow a paddock, or have a family car race in the NASCAR events. So let's see where we can get to in that. Thanks so much for joining us today, John. Really appreciate our chat. I love getting together to talk to you about you. I find it really mentally stimulating. I think this is a topic that deserves exploration, and encourage everyone who gets some content from this, some value from this, to reinvest back into this network. Reach out to John, contribute. Love to see a easy to guide and playbook. Any closing comments from you, John, before we wrap up?
No, nothing significant, Leon. Just a big thank you to yourself for broadly the work you're doing, but specifically for putting this conversation together. Certainly appreciate everything you're doing, and specifically the opportunity to talk with you today.
Amazing. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. Happy Friday. Look forward to speaking to you more soon. Cheers.